No, I'm doing that right now. It's about to be live.
Not a problem.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sarah Shearer, and I'm the president of the Albany Public Library Board of Trustees. And welcome to our November board meeting. Our first order of business is public comment.
So we did receive a public comment, and it was actually a person was watching the meeting for a college assignment and asked additional questions about the potential herbicide that was mentioned during the October public comment section. The question and response are attached to the agenda. If anybody from the public does want to make a public comment, they are asked to send an email to publiccomment@albanypubliclibrary.org. It's all one word, publiccomment@albanypubliclibrary.org. Also, you can call and leave a voicemail at 518-290-6905. There will be an additional opportunity prior to adjournment for anyone for another opportunity for public comment. You are asked to leave your name and address to identify yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Next on our agenda, we have a report tonight by our auditors.
You're muted, Carol.
Unmute.
Here we go.
You got me?
We got you now.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Carol Hausman. I'm a director at Marvin & Company, and our team finished your audit of the library's June 30th, 2021 financial statements. And you've all received drafts, and I'm just going to give you a broad overview of the audit communications and the financial statements. And please feel free to ask me questions. It might be best if I go through the presentation and then take questions. And I do know you're all very busy, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. I guess the first question is, should I share my screen and walk through the documents with you, or what's easiest for you guys? Does that make sense?
Yes, please.
What we do.
Okay, so.
And what I do, I will recommend
go-
that our board members turn off their videos, because that will help the stream for her presentation go a little better.
Okay. Okay, you are sharing, but do you guys see my screen?
Yes, we do.
And do you see a letter?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. Okay. So as part of our audit, one of the things we have to do is we're required to communicate to those charged with governance sort of a summary of some significant parts of the audit process and the accounting principles and that type of thing. So that is the first letter, and basically it goes through the fact that management is responsible for the selection and use of appropriate accounting policies. There were no new accounting policies of any significance adopted during the current year. So the policies followed last year are consistent with this year. And the policies followed make sense based on the guidance, the generally accepted accounting policy guidance. Accounting estimates are always a part of a financial statement presentation case, you have some significant estimates included in your financial statements, and they are related to your net pension liability, your other post-employment and health insurance liability, as well as the fair value of your investments. And as part of our audit, we take a look at those estimates and look at the assumptions that go into them for reasonableness. And I would say that based on our evaluation, you know, the assumptions used to develop the accounting estimates were reasonable in relation to the financial statements taken as a whole. As far as working with your team on the audit, we encountered no difficulties in working with your team and getting the information we needed. They were timely. They provided us with books and records that were adjusted and correct, and they really got us what we needed so that we could complete this when we were scheduled, and we really appreciate that. As far as any corrections or uncorrected adjustments, there were none required. So in the current year, what we were provided for is what you see in your financial statements. We did not propose any material adjustments. And for that matter, we had no disagreements with management. We obtained a management representation letter, and that just covers the fact that, you know, your team has disclosed to us any significant contingencies, commitments. They've made everything available for us that we've asked for, and they have made us aware of anything that would impact of significance our audit process. We're not aware that management consulted with other independent accountants, and we really had no other audit findings or issues. We did issue a management letter, and we will go through those findings in a minute. But in general, the audit process was very smooth, and there is not anything unusual to report to you. Now, as part of our audit, we do assess risk, and we do walkthroughs of your significant internal control processes and the controls over significant transactions. And as a result of that, we report to you, we're required to report to you in writing any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. And those deficiencies are really items that, if they existed, they relate to the design and operation of your procedures, and they wouldn't allow management or employees, while performing their assigned functions, to prevent or detect and correct misstatements on a timely basis. So basically, we're required to report those to those charged with governance. I would like to say that in the current year, we had no significant deficiencies found, and we had no material weaknesses. We did have other audit findings that we wanted to make you aware of. They didn't, there were compensating controls in place, but we did want to suggest that relating to your compensated absences calculation, GASB 16 pretty specific about how to calculate that, and there are some in our finding. We've suggested that you take a look at that and see if you know, the estimated liability next year, we suggest you calculate it using total hours available to eligible participants, and consider the maximum amount allowable to be paid out. And we also recommend that library review its calculation in order to comply with the take into consideration the fact that FICA should also be accrued. And I think that once the once you look at it, we don't feel it's going to be materially different, but we would suggest you follow that in the coming year. In addition, to strengthen internal controls over your bank reconciliation and investment reconciliation process, we currently, the individual preparing the bank rec has access to records as well as the asset. And that's considered a segregation of duties situation that should be improved upon. But really what we're recommending is that although compensating controls do exist because the board does look at the cash disbursements from the bank accounts at their monthly meetings, we recommend that somebody independent of the books records review the bank and investment reconciliations on a monthly basis and document that review. And that'll just strengthen your controls. So those are our communications. As far as the financial statements themselves go, they're very voluminous and there's a lot of disclosures in them. But I'm going to just walk through a couple things. Well, first of all, this is our auditor's report on the financial statements. And, you know, it's important to point out that management is responsible for the financial statements, and they're responsible for the accounting principles that are chosen to be followed and the design and implementation of internal controls relevant to the preparation of those financial statements. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on the financial statements based on our audit. And we do conduct our audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America, and also the standards applicable to financial audits contained in government audited standards. Those standards require that we plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the statements are free from material misstatement. And as you're aware, we don't look at every transaction. We really perform procedures to obtain audit events about the amounts and disclosures. And that will depend on where we assess the risk. And in making those risk assessments, excuse me, in making the risk assessments, we do consider the internal control over those transactions to decide how much testing to do. We believe that the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our opinion. And in our opinion, we believe the financial statements referred to above fairly in all material respects, the respective financial position of the governmental activities and each major fund of the library as of June 30th, 2021, and the changes in the financial position for that year ended June 30th, 2021. So that is our opinion on the financial statements. I think it's good to run through the statements briefly. Management discussions and analysis are included in the financial statement, and that is a good summary made by management, basically covering the overview of the financial statements, just the fact that the first statements are government-wide financial statements and provide sort of a total picture of the library, including long-term and short-term assets and liabilities. And then the fund financial statements that really focus on operations and more government, more current short-term activities versus the long-term. As far as the analysis goes in the MD&A, there is a comparison of the current year and the prior year with changes. And there is also management's highlight of what factors bearing on the future of Albany Public Library. And listed out there are management's thoughts on what's going to impact the library in the coming year, as well as yours. So good information there. If you move on to the statement of net position. This is so this is government-wide activity, and you will see that it has all of your long-term assets and liabilities. So for instance, it has your capital assets, it has deferred outflows of resources relating to your pension liabilities and your other post-employment benefit liabilities. There are your non-current liabilities, which includes all of your bonds, not just the current portion, as well as your deferred inflows of resources relating to your pensions and other post-employment benefits. And those are the significant items. Even though this shows your total liability relating to those, as we the ERS pension and OPEB liability, you're still in a position where you have a net position of 6.5 million in the current year. Most of that is tied up in your investment in capital assets, which is simply your capital assets less the related debt. You have some restricted assets, and then you have your unrestricted. If you look at your current year statement of activities, you'll see that in the current year, the library did incur a loss of $570,000. And the next statement presents your governmental funds, which are more on your short-term basis. And in that respect, all of those deferred inflows, outflows, and long-term liabilities, as well as the capital assets, aren't included in this activity. Again, you end up with fund equity of about 6.6 million, but you see that actually 2.7 of that is unrestricted, undesignated. And that swing from the government-wide is simply that in this statement, you're not recognizing those large liabilities that are not going to require any of your cash or assets in order to pay them in the short term. Again, the statement of revenue and expenditures, you in the current year in this statement showing the short-term activity, you had a $271,000 loss. However, the general fund had 140,000 positive. You expended 420,000 on capital projects. Moving along, the notes to the financial statements are really voluminous. I think that if you have time to look at the measurement focus and basis of accounting and financial statement presentation, you get a little better idea of what the government-wide financials represent versus the governmental fund financial statements. Running through this, I think it's important to note that we already mentioned there are estimates used and they can be significant. If you look down at your, let's see what I can point out for you as far as your cash and your investments go. So you'll see here, all deposits were covered entirely by collateral or federal depository insurance as of 6/30/21. So you were over collateralized, and that's just a timing thing. But you do want to make sure that you do have the collateral or the FDIC insurance in place to cover those assets. Moving down to long-term liabilities, you'll see that total interest expense in the current year was 757,000. As far as your bond indebtedness goes, you have a current portion coming up of 795,000 and 20 million in total. And you can see that your principal payments required right through 26 are kind of, they're not materially different from year to year, and the budget-wise, they're very consistent until you get to actually even 2000. Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at this. So there isn't a balloon payment, and you will have about a 1.7 million cash flow use each year relating to your bonds. Note 7 covers your ERS liability, and that really is significant. And I would suggest that that is provided, the liability, your share of the liability is provided and by New York State, and that information is audited, and the auditor does present financials on that. And I think one thing to really point out is that as the assumptions change, so here are your actuarial assumptions, and when you look at that, for both this pension and your other post-employment health insurance, changes in the inflation rate and the interest rate can have really significant impact on the dollar amounts you're showing as a liability. So as part of the required disclosures, for the ERS, you have to report the sensitivity of your liability to the discount rate assumption. So you currently have a $13,000 liability relating to your pension, and that's based on a 5.9%. With the 1% increase in that, you would have actually an asset of 3.5 million reported, and with the decrease, you'd have a liability of 3.8. So you can see how the assumptions really impact what goes through your financial statements. And for other post-employment benefits, it's a similar situation. They require you to disclose sensitivity to the discount rate. So you have a liability right now of 11.9 million. If the discount rate goes up 1%, that liability would go down to 9.7. If the discount rate were to decrease 1%, that liability would go up to 14 million. And one of the other big disclosures is, as we know, healthcare cost trends. In this actuarial calculation, the actuary used 7.5% in healthcare cost trends, decreasing to 4.5%. If that changed by 1%, you can see where that liability would, a 1% increase in cost trend would result in a $15 million liability versus 11, and vice versa. A 1% decrease would bring that liability down to 9.3. Other than that, not a lot of new disclosures. I would suggest to you that coming up, the lease standard is supposed to be in place for next year's audit, and that will require that all of your leases, including operating leases, be recorded on your balance sheet with a corresponding liability. I'd suggest that management start looking at that and seeing what leases they have. And as far as subsequent event disclosures, there were no significant subsequent events that need to be disclosed in these financial statements. The last item I want to cover is the under government standards, we are required to issue an auditor report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards. So as far as the internal controls over financial reporting, as mentioned before, we did not find any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we need to identify and report to you. And as far as compliance goes, during our audit, the results of our tests disclose no instances of non-compliance or other matters that would be required to be reported under government auditing standards. So just to summarize, we issued an unmodified opinion, which is the opinion you want. We identified no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and we noted no non-compliance material to the financials, and we had no financial statement findings to include. Last year, we did have a finding, and the current status of that needs to be reported, and the library has implemented their corrective action plan for the above finding, and therefore the finding did not require a repeat from the prior year. So that's all good. So I know that's a really lot of information. I guess now I can take questions if you have any.
This is Sarah Dallas. Carol, thank you for that, and kudos to the financial staff for doing such a great job. I might have missed this. The reason there are estimates in this report is because of the actuarial figures, which are a best guess based on statistics.
Yeah, well, I think it's a lot more than a best guess. Okay, so any financial statement you deal with has estimates in it. So if you think about something as simple as depreciation, management estimates the lives that asset is going to last. Of course, it's just an estimate. They think they're reasonable. It can change. So what is considered significant estimates in your financials are exactly what you said. The two items that were reported were provided by actuaries, and those are significant estimates just because of the dollar volume involved, as well as the swing that can occur if an assumption changes. And the assumptions are always changing, discount rates, et cetera, from one year to the next. But I would say as part of our audit, we look at, well, as far as ERS goes, there is an accounting firm auditing all of New York State's ERS liability. And so they're looking at all the actuarial assumptions for reasonableness, et cetera. And as far as your OPEB liability, you hire a specific actuary to provide that. They're reputable. We check that. We look at the assumptions for reasonableness. So yes, I think the key is they can change significantly from year to year based on new information is what it really is. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Hi, Carol. This is Sarah Shearer. So my question is going back to going back to the critique on the internal controls, and I could be wrong. Could you tell me if that had to do with, and the critique was lack of separation of duties. Is that because we went a significant period of time without an appointed treasurer?
Yes.
We had a deputy treasurer. Okay, so I believe we have the descriptions drafted in such a way so that when all the positions are filled, we should have that separation. Just the situation we were in. Okay, I understand that. Thank you.
Right. Absolutely. Anybody else have any questions?
I have one question.
Okay.
Trustees were also provided with a copy of the IT audit, and I was wondering if you had thoughts on the IT audit. If you went over it, I apologize. I didn't hear you go
Oh.
over it.
No, okay, so I should clarify, that really wasn't an audit, okay? That was just additional, we have your IT people or your consultants fill out a checklist. We don't check whether they answered it correctly, but what we do is take that information and provide you with a summary of where there might be risks, okay? Basically, we're doing it to see if there's real big holes that we need to address when doing our financial statement audit, but we are not auditing your system. I think really just reading through it, what I'd like to tell my clients is look at anything that, and I don't have it in front of me. Let me see if I can, you want to hold on a sec? Let me see if I can pull it up. Oh dear. Let's see. I don't think that, hold on. Nope. Why are you, bear with me. I would say that the risk assessment, many times it's just a tool you can look as to where you budget going forward. Something that you might want to, hold on. So for instance, here, you know, you've got some low, there's obviously the second item, sure. All we're explaining is that you are subject to regulatory compliance and always risk exposure when you're subject to PCI. So I think when you look at, I'm trying to think of what is here. I think it's just a good idea for your IT person and your management to walk through this and see if there's anything that you can address easily and budget for anything that you think that you should change going forward, but you might not have the money to do so now. So this is very broad, and it's not, whenever we do this, it's very broad, and it just provides you for some food for thought. I do know that a lot, I'm not sure if you had a finding related to training.
Yeah, I think we did.
So
Yeah.
I would suggest that that's one area that I feel is a very inexpensive fix, you know, to train your employees, use a service. It doesn't cost a lot, but then, you know, for instance, in our firm, we probably do a test 6 times a year for our employees. And it's really focused on clicking on the wrong thing, being tricked. And we'd rather have our employees get tricked when it's us than end up with the ransomware, right? So I would suggest to you that usually the training is that we utilize, and I'm at a loss for the name of it, but it's very reasonable. And it takes about a half hour. I think we probably have to do modules no more than 4 times a year for a half hour. And it really does make, like, I think the last 3 times we've had no employees get caught, is what it is. So something like that is very easy to implement and may actually, you know, have a big benefit to your organization, as far as that goes. The PCI stuff is really just informational. It's, you know, I would go through it and read it and see what you think. And I'm frozen again. You have a contingency plan in place. It's, you know, the risk level is low, even though it's just partially. So, and the passwords and confidential and unique, you really, I think everybody knows they should do something in that area. So I would say that these findings, some of them are pretty easy to address. And although I'm not an IT person, I know what we've gone through at our organization, and I know that many of our clients have at least addressed the items that could result in, you know, phishing schemes and that type of thing.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That sounds good.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't too, we issue these and it really is just for your use, you know, I don't try to get into it and try to explain it. But if somebody had a concern about any of the findings, I can connect you with our IT manager, and he's the one who really works on the protocol for PCI and the, you know, the scanning and those issues. Thanks, Tom.
And I can let you know that most of these items have been
Anybody else?
have been looked at by our IT manager, and
Good.
he has taken steps amongst several items on there already. And he actually just completed a cybersecurity certificate himself, so he was well on the
Excellent.
way of planning a training session.
Excellent.
Thanks, Melanie.
Okay, if nobody has any other questions, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'll sign out. We'll get you final copies if the board approves the financial statements, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay, bye now.
Good night.
Good night.
May I ask one question, Melanie?
Yeah.
Before we go on. Does APL have an insurance rider for ransomware and other things?
We do have cybersecurity insurance, yes.
Okay, thank you.
The next item of business we have is our consent agenda. We have the minutes from our October board meeting and the operating check register. Would anybody like to make a motion on the consent agenda? Sarah Dallas would like to make a motion on the consent agenda.
A second.
Brigitte seconds. Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, we can go to board docs to vote.
Is Arlene present? She's still absent? Okay.
Do you mind scrolling down, Rebecca? I can't see the vote.
Oh, it's because I minimized the screen. Hold on one second. I have so many windows open. Come on. Can you see it?
I'm seeing a motion and a second, but I'm not seeing any vote results.
Oh. Hmm. Has it changed?
Not yet. Oh, there it is. Thank you. And motion carries. Our next order of business is our finance reports. And I'm not sure, Sean and Adam, if you've discussed who would like to present or, but
We're gonna
I'll turn. Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna split it up a little bit, but
Sounds
Sarah.
good. Thank you.
Before I started, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Adam for his help and assistance in getting me set up and sort of giving me a background on all things finance related to the library. I really appreciate his taking the time, and he did a really great job.
Thank you.
So what we plan on doing is I'll just do a quick overview of the reports that were included in the agenda, and then turn it over to Adam to get into a little more detail on things. So the reports in the agenda cover September 2021, which is about a quarter the way through of the 21-22 fiscal year. Of the 5 major sections of the expenditures budget, 4 of them are 25% or less, which is what we would normally be expecting after the first quarter. The occupancy cost section is the only one that is over 25%. The construction grant expense line is the primary cause for this. Though several other lines are also over the 25%. And there was no capital fund expenditures during the month of September. So I'll turn it over to Adam to go over a little bit more.
Okay, thank you, Sean. So just to get into a little more detail about some of those points, the construction grant expense line is somewhat misleading, as the amounts being expensed here were budgeted for in prior periods. Much of the expenses were also covered by revenue that was recorded in prior periods. So in future budgets, we may not include a construction grant expense line on these reports, as these types of expenses may start to be exclusively recorded on the capital fund reports. And the building repair and furniture budgets are also being spent a bit more quickly than we anticipated. Our hope is that a combination of reduced spending and a potential budget modification will address these concerns without impacting the overall budget too significantly. So if you have any questions on these reports, feel free to ask and we'll try to answer them.
I don't
Does
have
anybody? Oh, go ahead.
I don't have any questions, but I was just going to say I like the way that you guys split up this memo with each person's perspective. I thought that was good, helpful.
I was just gonna
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Sean and Adam. Welcome, Sean, and I do like your tag team here. Very informative. Thank you.
I'm just going to echo those remarks, and congratulate Sean on his first treasurer's report for us. So again, welcome.
Thanks.
If nobody has any questions on the finances, we move to trustees reporting out and upcoming events. Does anybody, any of the trustees have anything to share regarding interactions with the library over the last month?
I attended the foundation gala, and it was wonderful. It was a little damp, but spirits were good. And Melanie and Scott did a fabulous job, as all the staff who were there. And it was kind of bittersweet saying goodbye to Scott in a somewhat formal occasion. But it was well done. And if people have the opportunity, I recommend it for next year.
Does anybody else have anything to share? Okay, I can go. I made it to the Pieced Together exhibit at the Pine Hills branch. I'm a big fan of the art exhibits that go on in Pine Hills. If you get a chance to go over and see it, I believe the exhibit is there until April. The piece in the entryway when you walk in was really, really cool. I think that was our favorite piece, but it was overall, it's a really nice collection. And anyone else before we move on to committee reports? All right, our first committee report is UHLS. Oh, I'm sorry, Arlene is not here. No, Arlene is still not here. Okay. Sorry, I have to scroll. Next report, Personnel Committee, Jenna.
Hey folks, sorry, I'll put my, see me now? Okay. So the Personnel Committee met and we reviewed a number of position descriptions as we are going through the grid to assure that position descriptions match the actual positions. We reviewed the Assistant Library Director position, which we felt was pretty accurate, and we didn't make any changes to that position. We did suggest some edits to the budget manager position, but we need some more information. One of the things the committee is realizing is that we need to have a meeting with civil service because we just don't know what can and can't be changed in some of these positions. And we're finding some of the language just doesn't fit the actual positions, but we don't want to make changes to them that would require them getting reapproved by civil service. And so we then looked at the account clerk position and librarian 3. Librarian 3 we felt didn't need any revisions and seemed to be a little bit more updated than prior positions we had looked at. And so we thought that it might be able to be used as a template for some of the other positions that had language that just didn't really make sense in the positions. Like some talk about the demeanor of the person or their physical condition for positions that don't really require a lot of physical activity. So we also took a look at maintenance manager, public information officer, and the library director position. And so obviously with a search for a new director, the library director position is something of acute interest. We decided as a committee that our next step is to invite the HR manager to our next meeting. And we would like to have a meeting with our council with human resources and civil service all at once, if possible, so that we can just get a feel for what we're actually allowed to change. And I think that's it. Do I haven't hear any questions?
Thank you, Jenna. Next up is the Executive Committee. Just minimizing my screen so I can see both. So we had two pieces of unfinished business to attend to. The first was we received an update on the board retreat planning that staff is helping us plan. The report was that the search for a facilitator has begun. So they took the outline that they had created to give to potential facilitators, telling them what we were looking for in a retreat this year. Trustees were able to give feedback and we made some amendments to that, and then it went out to the facilitators. So right now the library is in the process of securing a facilitator. After that, we will secure a date and we will be on our way to our retreat this year. The second piece of unfinished business was the committee approved the board member expectations document. That was something that was started a couple years ago, and we were able to finish it in this board meeting. This will be shared on the board docs library and can be sent out to trustees. And then under new business, we had three pieces of new business. Two of those items were appointing trustees to our new ad hoc committees. The first is the Ad hoc Strategic Plan Committee, and the second, the Ad hoc Executive Director Search Committee. On our Strategic Plan Committee, we have Jenna, myself, and Arlene. And on the Executive Director Search Committee, we have Donna, Jarre, and Brigitte. And thank you again for everyone, all of the trustees filling out the interest survey. That definitely helped us out when determining where to place trustees. So thank you all for your interest in these committees. And the last piece of business the committee took up was reviewing the nominating committee description. As you remember, we created descriptions for all of our committees, and we had a good discussion. We made a few updates just so that it had the same format as the other committee descriptions, and we were able to talk through some new ideas. That was our executive committee meeting, and I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has any. Hearing none. The last committee that met was Policy and Governance Committee. Sarah.
Lots of buttons to push to bring it up where I can see it. We met. It was sad or bittersweet because it was Scott's last committee meeting, and he shared a lot of good and important information, as did Melanie and Rebecca. We did some unfinished business, as you can see. We talked about the art reconsideration form. We had some questions, and we're going to need to discuss the form and its use and reframe it a little bit. We tied it also into the request for exhibit art. And we're requesting the staff to please develop a procedure for approving and denying an art exhibition request and how the artist can appeal a denial. And we also decided to table the requests to exhibit art to further develop and streamline the process. We looked at the public access to library records, and we had a discussion about it. We made a motion to adopt the public access to library records. The discussion dealt with a recommendation from the attorney regarding who the appeal to look at the records be given to, whether it was the Board of Trustees or the director or acting director or the person so assigned. We decided to approve it as is, and if we as a board want to discuss it, we can do so in further detail. We reviewed the unrepresented employee evaluation, and we had a motion to adopt the unrepresented employee evaluation policy. We also looked at the service to children, and we made a motion to adopt the service to children policy. We looked at the evaluation of the board trustees. We then made a motion to adopt the evaluation of the Board of Trustees policy with no changes. The hazardous material policy, council requested some more time to review the edits suggested by staff to make sure they follow OSHA guidelines. And we looked at the fund balance, and we had a motion to adopt the fund balance policy after it was reviewed by the Audit and Finance Committee, and the same with the investment policy. We made a motion to adopt the investment policy. We were also spent a bit of time discussing a workflow. We wanted to have everybody's workflow, well, everybody's time be used appropriately and things not go back and forth, back and forth. We decided that we're going to use the grid to keep us on task to review policies, which we are going to do. And we reiterated that the role of the board is to set the policy, and we appreciate staff's input and helping us, but it's the final decision of the board on the language and the intent of the policy. And it's up to the staff to come up with the procedures in which the policy can be followed. We had no executive session. And Brigitte Jarret, do you want to add anything to this report?
No, it was very productive. So I appreciate you, Sarah, for presenting it, and that's very concise on what we discussed. So thank you.
And the last thing, we're going to take a little break because it was a 2-hour meeting, and I think we accomplished a lot, and we'll meet again in January.
Any questions for Sarah or the P&G committee?
I have one question. Sarah, I noticed in the minutes, it looked like you guys approved the investment policy that the finance committee had taken a look at our last meeting at P&G's request. Did you guys approve that, and will that come to the full board for approval? I don't remember how it works.
I believe if there are no changes, it doesn't come to the board. And if there are proposed edits, that it comes to the full board.
Technically, it has already been approved by the board once, so unless changes are made, which is actually why the privacy, I do want to just make a small minor correction to the public access to library records. It's being brought up because there was a slight change in the policy because 2 lines didn't match where they should have matched. So it was just bringing them to match. So that's why that one is actually being, even though it's not technically a change, it's just a correction in the policy, but because the change has been made, it will be coming up for vote.
Okay, thanks.
And I think, Tom, we're keeping it as the treasurer as it was written, because there was a discussion on that.
Okay, great. That was really my question. So great. I'm glad you guys talked it through. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah, for the report, and I look forward to further discussion at the next meeting.
Thank you, P&G Committee. Next up, we have the Director's Report. Melanie.
Yay. So this one, I'm keeping it in the kind of the standard format that Scott did. That might change in the future should I add my own little spin to it, but we're keeping it as is for now. So just for our summary, with COVID-19, we did have 1 confirmed case of COVID this month, which did require the employee to quarantine on their own, but no other contact tracing or quarantines were necessitated. Similar to what the 2 of our trustees have reported out, Pine Hills was the hop in place this month for services and programs. Not only did we do the art show, the Piece Together art show, but we also hosted the Branching Out event, the last event for Albany Public Library before it goes on to another location, another library system, and a Literary Legends Gala. All 3 events were kind of new events for us that they took place on the patio outside in front of the Pine Hills Library. We found out the patio is a perfect 20 by 40 rectangle, which fit a nice tent. So we were able to have a tent for these purposes with lighting, and it just made for a really magical event for many of these activities. And it was really interesting because 2 of the events had music, and across the street there was all the restaurants and businesses at the point, and we got a lot of buzz in the community because of those events, and a lot of people in the community walked by. So it was very magical to have a little bit of more normalcy back in the library with those. When it comes to our operations, after some issues were brought up to us regarding our bid request for the large auditorium audiovisual project, we decided that we will be issuing a more formalized request for bids that is included in the packet under new business and will be released tomorrow. We thought we didn't need a full formalized bid process for this, and so we submitted a request for quotes, and there was some confusion with some of the terminology that we used. And so even though we thought we were going to award it to one vendor, another vendor brought up something that he thought was unclear, so we decided, for all fairness, to resubmit the bid process and to fully formalize it. So there should hopefully be no questions on what we were talking about. We are partnering with the City of Albany's Planning Department and Capital Roots for a neighborhood mural and street safety project that will be adjacent to the Howe branch on the south end. There was a kickoff event for this. It was actually supposed to happen the same day as the gala, but because of the rain, it was postponed until the Tuesday following. And it was a really wonderful event. About 40 people showed up and included sidewalk painting and connections with members of what they expect that project to be. And then we did finish our health insurance enrollment for benefits for the 2021-2022 season. We submitted a process for distribution of laptops for the emergency connectivity grant that's in the packet for you guys to review. We tend to amend, we did realize we will have to amend the internet use policy, because our internet use policy did state that we do not filter computers, and since these will be filtered, we added just a quick amended line that will be up for vote tonight for that policy to address this specific project and other projects that may come up forth in the future. Overall circulation is up again from last year, with our notable branch being Bach, whose numbers are actually almost, or usually matching, and at 1 month actually exceeded the 3-year average. So Bach is a hop in place, and it has pretty much almost returned back to normal circulation wise. So that's really promising overall, because we know that took a huge hit this year with COVID. Computer usage and door count continue to inch upwards as we start having more people return to in-person use of our libraries. And one item I did want to note for anybody who gets really into the numbers, if they see that our Wi-Fi at North Albany is registering 0, it is because we did have to take the server down as part of the renovation. So that will be hopefully back up by the end of November once they finish that space, but it almost looks where the server needs to move to is just about finished. So we should be able to get that back up and running so people can still access the Wi-Fi at that location. And then unfortunately, we did have an incident on Halloween, bright and early in the morning, technically officially before I took the realm as interim director by just a couple hours. We did have a vehicle unfortunately hit our Arbor Hill West Hill branch and took out one of the windows and one of the exterior wall panels. We did have the insurance adjuster come out and one of the structural engineers come out to take a look at the building today. We have found that it is literally just that window and exterior panel. There has been no structural damage to the building. So it should be a fairly quick repair once we get the insurance adjustment made. And that is about it. I can take any questions.
Sorry, I just had to scroll back. I knew I had a question about something in the beginning. Could you just explain how the COVID case didn't affect anyone else? How no one else had to quarantine, and just in general, we don't need specifics, but how did that occur?
I believe this situation was the employee in their frame of contact was not at work. They were either they weren't in the building. They were either work from home or they contracted it on a leave of absence. I forget which one it was, but because they weren't in contact with any staff members, that's why no additional contact tracing was necessary.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Do we know if this is a vaccinated employee?
I do not know. That does not fit towards me.
On that note, do we have updated statistics? I know there was a poll going on among the staff to try to figure out what percentage of staff is now vaccinated. Do we have an updated number on that?
I do not have an updated number, and our HR manager is on a vacation at the moment, so I will get that information to you as soon as she returns.
No problem.
I'm
I
so
did also-
jealous that I didn't go to the gala now, because it sounds like it was amazing.
It was amazing. It was wet. Because we did want the majority of it inside. We did do the actual award presentation inside the building. Right as that happened, the heavens opened up. So it was actually even a little difficult to hear everybody because the rain was beating down on the glass window, the skylight there. So, but it was beautiful nonetheless. And we definitely are going I've talked to staff at that location. We're definitely going to do more outside activities at that location because they really work well. We're actually coming up with new ideas for the near future for that location. And I did notice the chat from Brigitte asking about if there was any injuries. Not that I am aware of. I got to get down to get the full report. I know there were 2 individuals sitting on the retaining wall that was there, and the individual, I don't believe, hit them, but because they all got in an argument afterwards, is what I've been told. So I think they were all well enough to argue with each other after the fact, is what I've been informed of.
And I was just going to say, I think I saw pictures on social media of the Halloween at the Palace Theater story time. That looked very cool.
That was a really cool event too, yeah.
All right. If nobody else has any other questions regarding the director's report, Melanie, if you wanted to go over the informal item, the procedure for the computers, the laptops.
Sure. So now let me share my screen here. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. So this pertains to the Emergency Connectivity Funds grant that we received to provide 100 laptops and hotspots to students within the city of Albany. And students is a very broad term with the grant. And we were trying to determine how best to distribute these devices to individuals, and it's a long-term loan. It will be at least through the end of June, and we're going to ask for an extension through the end of August because of the length of time it took for us to get. We've been approved for the amount, and the amount would take us through the end of August with this. So knowing that other educational institutions did receive this funding as well, what we thought we would do is we would contact our partners that we are already connected with to identify the students who have not received equipment in order to further their educational needs. So we will work with, first, obviously, the school district, the city school district of Albany, to identify their students who are not covered by their own initiatives. And then we would work along in the following order: the Albany Community Action Partnership, ACAP, Head Start classrooms and their families, Capital Regions BOCES, the Albany Housing Authority, our literacy volunteers of Rensselaer County, USCRI, Refugee and Immigrant Support Services of Vermontis, RISE, and finally the Friends and Foundation of the Albany Public Library, because they did assist us with the grant, and it was included in the grant was library patrons needing to attend library educational programs, which the Tuesday Book Talks would fall under. So we figured once we work our way down that list of our community partners to help us identify those individuals, we should probably hit the 100 devices loaned out at that point. The individuals will be required to sign off that they're taking responsibility for the equipment, and the equipment will be is to be returned to the library at the end of the program. So if there's a minor, obviously it would be a parent or guardian that would sign off on the receiving of that equipment.
Thank you, Melanie. I did see, Bob, your hand is up.
It is, and we sort of changed subjects, but I just wanted to perhaps take an opportunity to make Melanie blush a little bit. I've worked with Scott, as many of you have, for, 8 years or so, and we had some very refined processes, and certainly I would get little notes from him and knew exactly, what and when he needed things. But this last week, Mel and I had a lot of loose ends to clean up, and we worked out some great processes to do it. And I just want to tell you how easy that was, a transition. And I know that's largely because she's been here as long as she has, but it certainly went smoother than anybody could have expected. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I
Thank
also,
you, Melanie.
can I also mirror that? Because I actually went to Melanie's office just the other day, on Monday, and complimented her because this honestly was like an effortless agenda this month. I always felt like I was in the loop, and she really did make a good transition. So yes, I definitely agree with everything Bob said. It was awesome.
Thank you, guys. Little hiccups once in a while. It's just trying to find. Bob's put it very eloquently. Loose ends, a lot of loose ends that we're trying to tie together really quick. So forgive me. I'm a big email person, so because I like everything documented, so I can have something to fall back on and refer back to should I be missing something. So if I inundate you with emails, it's only to tie up these loose ends.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Melanie. I had two things. So one, before I ask if anyone has questions about what Melanie just went over, I received a message. Bob, did we have to vote to accept the audit report?
We should have a motion to accept it. Yeah, absolutely. If that wasn't done.
Okay. So we can take questions. If anyone has any questions for the laptop procedure that Melanie just went over, then we can go back and take a vote on the audit. Seeing none.
I did have a question. I'm sorry.
Yes. No, it's okay.
In reference to the use, is there going to be any further follow-up in reference to how the laptops are being handed out, or just any report of how they're being handed out or what their policies are? Or is it just we're turning them over when requested and that's just that?
So the individuals will have a signed release that once we identify those individuals with our partners, the individuals will have to come to the library to pick up the devices and sign a release that they're accepting responsibility for the devices. Their use is up to them because they are being handed the device, and we're not asking for it back until June or August of 2022. It is for their educational use, and the intent is that they're using it. So we're not policing that use of the equipment. And then it's going to be a similar procedure and form that we currently have for our laptop and hotspot use, that they just have to sign off that they're taking responsibility and it will be returned. And should they not return, there will be a cost, and it will most likely, we're going to use the depreciation cost of the equipment that they would pay for.
So just quickly, in reference to how they're coming to the library, so these organizations are going to identify people and they're going to come to the library. Is it just going to be, hey, ACAP sent me? Where do I sign up, or how is that going to go?
We'll get a list of names, and we'll have like a checkoff list. So, Joe Smith from ACAP will have to come in and be handed off so we'll get the list from the partners identifying the individuals, and those individuals will come in and we'll check them off of the list that we have been given.
Okay, so this is just my last question in reference to that. If there's community members that we identify that we know have a need for these laptops and we send them down, is that something that is acceptable, or do they have to be funneled through the organizations we're working with as opposed to a trustee knowing someone and sending them down?
That's, I guess, up to you guys. We were, for the expedition of this program, to get them in the hands of the individuals as soon as we have them in hand. We're still waiting on the hotspots right now. That's why we were going to work with our partners, because we figured it would be, there are partners in education that we already know those individuals will be using them for educational purposes, because that is the key to this program, is that they're used for educational purposes. And we just figured this would, having these community partners that are involved in education would be the most consistent and, can't think of the word I'm trying to think of right now, fair, essentially, way to identify those individuals. So there's no favoritism played.
Okay, I guess I'll just have some offline conversation with you about it to just get a little bit more clarity. Thank you.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. If somebody would like to make a motion to accept the auditor's report. I saw Donna's hand up first, and then Sarah Dallas, would you like to second? Okay, so I have Donna making the motion and Sarah Dallas seconding. Any further discussion on the auditor's report or approving the auditor's report? Then we can go to board docs and vote.
Jenna, could you state your vote or vote in board docs? Thank you.
I did vote in board docs. I did vote in board docs, but my vote is yes.
Yes, it went through, Donna. Thank you.
Okay, yep.
And the motion carries. Thank you, everyone. The next order of business, we have one item under unfinished business, and that's the Albany Housing Authority MOU Wi-Fi agreement that we had started looking at prior meetings. Melanie or Bob, would one of you like to take us through it briefly and just refresh us all on the subject matter?
Mel, you want me to take it or do you want to?
I'll have you take it.
Okay.
This one just...
So you'll recall that this has been in place for about a year. There were grant funds that were received for the library and the housing authority to partner to provide Wi-Fi in public spaces governed by the housing authority. We had a memorandum of agreement in place that basically said that they would give us access to their buildings, we would hang equipment on it and provide the services and charge against those grant programs to do it. As we began the process of installing some of that Wi-Fi equipment, it became clear that it wasn't the best idea to have us making alterations to Albany Housing Authority buildings, particularly drilling holes into them to hang the mounting equipment and et cetera. So we proposed as we move forward with the second portion of this program and in the event that the grant funding is renewed, that when we install equipment, they will put the mounting brackets on their own building at a place to be determined jointly between us and them. They will put electrical service to that point, and then we'll come in and hang the equipment on those excuse me, on those mounting brackets and connect them to the network and to the electrical service. So it's really just a cleanup of those issues. Frankly, I worked with the Albany Housing Authority's attorney to do this, and he came up with what I now regard as pretty clear language throughout the agreement to shift these burdens. And I think it's ready to go. He did sign off today that that they're okay to go and that it's fine for the board to approve this evening.
Thank you, Bob. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve this agreement?
I'll make a motion to approve the agreement.
Tom motions. Would somebody like to second?
I'll second. I'll second.
Brenda, thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? Hearing none, we can all go to board docs to vote. And the motion carries. Moving on to new business. The first item is the internet use policy. Melanie, I know you already alluded to this prior, but do you just want to briefly again take us through the proposed change here?
Yes. So once again, as I stated, the big issue or the concern we had was that our internet use policy does state prior to this that, you know, Albany Public Library does not use filtering software. And so we just want to amend that to say generally, Albany Public Library does not use filtering software. However, in the discretion of the board and in alignment with any stipulations on receiving grant funding, the library may filter internet use in connection with certain programmatic initiatives. And that way it covers the current grant that we received, the Emergency Connectivity Fund grants, which did require us to filter those devices. And those will be filtered by T-Mobile, the hotspot provider, externally. So they'll, and it's part of the federal program. So they're in alignment with all federal guidelines for that. And I think there was one other, the library does not monitor or have control over information. And Bob made the extra recommendation that we remove that. The library does not monitor, to just say that the library does not have control over information at the internet. We should never even allude to the fact that we would monitor.
Good point. One last question. I mean, no, might not be the last question, but the last question from me. Will the devices that are filtered be marked?
Yes.
And I just wanted to be clear that, you know, the policy says in the board's discretion, but that means that we would approve such things on a case-by-case basis each time, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Since this policy is not coming from the P&G committee, this was a bit of a tight timeline. It was noticed a little while ago. And again, this program is starting. So that's why the policy has been brought to this board meeting. So it can be put into policy prior to the laptops being issued. So if we would like to approve this, this will need a motion and a second. Sarah, I see your hand. Would you like to motion to approve this policy? Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm not seeing everybody right now since this screen sharing. I can only see a few people at a time. If anyone else is, there we go, raising a hand.
Second.
Donna seconds. Thank you. Any further discussion or questions on the proposed change to this policy? Then we can all go to board docs to vote. And the motion carries. Thank you. The next item under new business is the public access to library records policy. And I believe this policy did come out of the P&G committee. Yes. Would somebody like to take us through the proposed changes to this policy?
Sarah, do you want me to do that or do you want to?
Oh, I've talked too much. It's your turn, Bob.
This was just a quick error that I think we caught when we did the review. I want to say either in the last review or the one before, there was a change to have the appeal process, whenever it's invoked, go from the records access officer to the executive director. And I think we found one lingering reference to the Board of Trustees. So the change in 6A is just to make consistent with the rest of the document that appeals go to the executive director. To my knowledge, we've never had a FOIL appeal at the library. We've certainly had a number of FOIL requests, but they always get dealt with between the records access officer, who is currently Stephanie Simon, and myself. So you haven't had an appeal yet, as far as I know.
I think the only appeal we had was the individual who was unhappy that we did not provide personnel records. But you came back and said,
Your memory's better than mine, Mel. I don't remember it, but regardless, this just tightens it up. So it's the executive director that's handling those appeals. It's just not, it's not practical to have the board do it because you have to deal with them in such a short time frame. You'd have to be calling special meetings to deal with FOIL appeals. So.
And since this policy amendment did come out of the P&G committee, I believe we're just looking for a second from somebody who does not serve on the P&G committee.
A second.
Thank you, Jenna. Any further questions or comments on this motion? If not, we can go to board docs and vote. And the motion carries. The next item under new business is the RFB Audiovisual project. Melanie mentioned this earlier, but Melanie, if you want to just do another quick summary about what this is.
For a second there, it wasn't opening up. So essentially, as I stated before, when we were going for, we received grants fund, it was bullet aid grant, I believe, for the renovation of the auditorium, the large auditorium, including AV upgrades to that space. And we went for quotes for the installation or the purchasing of the equipment and the installation of said equipment. We went through the process. We received 2 quotes, 2 bids, and we felt one bid was more in alignment with what we were looking for. So we initially awarded it to that vendor. The other vendor did come back with issues that he read part of or he interpreted, I shouldn't say he read, but he interpreted part of the process or part of the proposal in a different way than we had intended. so after speaking with legal on this matter, we thought it would be better just to formalize the bid process, because we went for quotes instead of a formalized bid process. And we just thought that this would help clarify the issues. Am I explaining that adequately, Bob?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that in addition to the confusion that we stumbled on, the numbers came in higher than the bid limit a little bit. We weren't entirely sure what to expect, and they did indeed come in over 35. So knowing what we know now, we really can't go back and fix this just with quotes. So this is a formal RFB, request for bids. You'll see it's a much more formalized document, and it addresses the areas of confusion that had come up when the quotes came in. Because we've been dealing with this for so long, it is on a very tight time frame, and so hopefully we'll have responses ready to award to the board at the December meeting. This does need to go to the lowest cost responsible bidder. So whoever comes in with the best deal, as long as they're not disqualifiable for some reason, will get the work.
Would somebody like to make a motion on this before we open back up to questions?
Do we actually need a motion on this to accept it, or is it just?
I think it's really up to the board. There's no harm in having it moved, but I think staff can put this out. We know what we're doing. We know it's a issue. The board's going to need to approve the final purchase, but whether you want to move the actual release of the bid is up to you.
I think we should make a motion, Sarah, and the reason why is that it gets included into the minutes.
I also think that we should make a motion on it, especially when we start thinking about equity and folks have an issue, because we do want to make sure that we are striving for equity and inclusion.
Thank you, Brenda and Sarah. Would somebody like to make the motion on this?
I would like to make a motion to move forward.
Brenda, thank you. Would somebody like to second the motion? And I see Sarah's hand. Any further questions or comments on this motion before we go to a vote?
I would change that motion to release the RFB for the audiovisual project. Probably can just be done in the minutes as long as everybody's comfortable with that.
So moved.
And the motion carries. And the amendment has already been made. Motion to release. Thank you, Rebecca. The next item under new business is the Clarity HR Solutions Agreement. Bob, would you like to take us through this?
Sure. I think you heard about last month what the services that you're contracting for are. There were a few provisions in the agreement that weren't written in the way that was most favorable to the library. So Scott and Melanie asked me to reach out to Clarity. I worked with their owner to make the changes. They accepted all of the changes, which do reflect in the redlined version of the document. They basically included adding a statement that they would tell you who they were assigning and agree that they can't change that person on you. They have now done that. And in the version of the agreement that is not redlined, it has the person's name, who is just slightly escaping me. So
Sheridan.
Thank you. And then the other issues had to do with the ownership of any materials that they were going to create. It's perfectly fine that they own the materials, but they have to give you permission to use them in any way you need them, and to be clear that they can share them with you and with us if we need to do something to implement their recommendations. And then last but not least, They had some provisions in here that made it clear that we had to have insurance to benefit them, but it was silent about them having to have insurance to benefit us. So that got included, as did some changes to the standards of reasonable care that they have to apply in providing the services under the agreement. So again, all of these were agreed to, and they are ready to proceed as soon as we sign this.
Sounds good. Thank you, Bob. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve this agreement?
I'll make the motion to accept this agreement.
Thank you, Brigitte. Would somebody like to second? Donna, thank you. Any further questions or comments on this motion or agreement?
I'm having a senior moment. Could you just refresh me what Clarity HR will be doing?
They are going to be providing services as you transition into the new HR position that you've created, to help sort of ensure that best practices are put in place. I think you have a sound HR department right now, but I think that we've been doing a lot for a very long time in similar ways, and this is an opportunity to use a potential transition to refresh some of the processes that you use. I think that there's also some hope that they can help guide you in ways to get better results out of the civil service system, particularly as it comes to recruiting for certain positions that have been hard to fill.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, we can go to board docs and vote. And the motion carries. I believe.
I just had a comment. I, of course, voted yes on this. With Clarity, would we be given any type of updates on what they're actually doing in the product that they're actually providing to us?
Of course.
How would that work?
Well, we'll be able to, this is a semi-quick turnaround with this process as well. We would like it, the discussion with them is that we're hoping to have this audit completed by January at the latest.
Okay.
So we would probably give you an update at the December board meeting, and then again at the January findings would be presented. Most
Okay.
likely.
All right. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you for that, Brenda. I believe our next order of business is to go into an executive session. And I actually have the language here to discuss the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation. Would somebody like to motion us into executive session for that purpose?
I'll make a motion to go into executive session for that purpose.
Thank you, Tom. Would somebody like to make a second? Like to second?
It's Donna, I believe.
I will second that.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I can only see so many. Donna,
Before we-
seconds. Thank you. Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, before we go in, 10.5 retirement agreement, we're not going to discuss that, or we're going to go into executive session first? Oh, that's all in part of it?
Yep.
Oh,
That's what
okay.
we're discussing in executive.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to go into executive session? Otherwise, we can go into board docs to vote. And the motion carries. I believe we're going to go into a breakout room at this time for our executive session. Rebecca, are you ready for who motioned us out of executive session?
One second, okay?
Mhm.
Okay, who was it?
Sarah Dallas. And Brenda seconded.
Okay,
Unanimous.
you're at 7:59. Thank you.
We are taking up our last item under new business, which is a retirement agreement, and we are looking for a motion on this agreement.
Should we make a note that this is private? The public can't see this item. It is confidential.
You're okay, Becky. We'll take the motion to approve that retirement agreement with Ms. Reinhardt.
Thank you.
I would like to make a motion to approve the retirement agreement for Ms. Reinhardt.
Thank you, Brenda. Is there a second? Oh, I do see Donna's hand.
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion before we head into board docs and vote? I am not hearing or seeing any further discussion.
Jenna, could you please state your vote? There you go.
Sorry, I have too many tabs open.
Me too. I'm not sure if you can see it, but the motion did pass. It might be because it's still listed as private,
Oh, okay.
but it is a unanimous decision.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I do see that Sarah Dallas is leaving. Not a problem. The next item on our agenda, Pandemic Operations Plan POP update. Melanie, do we have a POP update?
So we have no official update as of yet, but we do want to let you all know that we are in discussions of a possible adjustment to the POP for next month. As we go into the winter months, we are in partnership with the Code Blue Coalition. So we want to take that into consideration when we make these decisions. And also we're hoping with the announcement that the 5 to 11-year-old population can now be vaccinated, that will assist with things as well.
Thank you. We will look for that prior to our next board meeting. That brings us to our second public comment. Rebecca, is there any other public comment for tonight?
Let me just refresh. There is no additional public comment for today. Thank you.
Thank you. And then before we adjourn, I'm just going to run down our committee list again so we can discuss which committees are planning to meet prior to our December board meeting. So just going alphabetically, Audit and Finance Committee.
As far as I know, I don't think we have a reason to meet in between now and the next board meeting.
Okay. Executive committee, yes, I owe you all an email. We actually had a second proposal for legal come in prior to the deadline. So we will need to get together to discuss interviews and a selection time. Facilities committee.
I'm going to check with Adam to see where we are with North Albany, if there's any updates, as well as Washington Avenue. And if not, I don't see anything for the next board meeting, maybe after that.
That makes sense. Thank you, Brigitte.
Thank you.
Next one is nominations committee. I know Arlene is not here tonight. I don't believe the committee has any work pending. If
No,
one
we
of
do
the
not.
other committees, thank you, Brenda. LMNOP, personnel committee.
So personnel, we need to basically get in touch with staff to see about planning that super meeting. And I think that that's really our next step. So the answer is maybe.
Sounds good. I am looking forward to that super meeting. And our last standing committee is P&G. And I believe Sarah stated earlier that they're taking the month of December off and they will reconvene as a committee in January, or taking a month off. So November, December, and then they will reconvene. So possibly not before the next committee meeting.
Yes, that's
Or
correct.
next full board meeting. Thank you. Appreciate.
Good question.
And then, oh yes, Jenna.
Oh no, you might have been, you go.
I was just going to mention our two brand new ad hoc committees both need to meet. So if both of those can get scheduled for as soon as those committee members can meet, that would be fantastic. Jenna, what were you going to say?
Basically that, I was wondering, do those committees have chairs, or how are we going to delegate point people for that?
Yeah, that was something we sort of touched on in our executive committee meeting. I realized when we came out of our executive session appointing the members that we didn't appoint chairs. One of our members said that they thought the ad hoc committees could vote for their own chairs. So for this first meeting,
Yes.
we don't really have a point person per se for scheduling purposes. So if all three committee members could sort of plan with Rebecca to get an idea of a doodle poll to get that date established.
Yes.
Can I just make one comment? I'll let Donna go first and then I'll make my comment.
Sure. Just with the ad hoc committees, will there be a charge from the executive committee having to do with deadlines, resources, timeframes, specific deliverables? I mean, obviously, we know what the high, the high end deliverable is, but kind of diving down into that a little bit.
The committee decided not to do that.
Okay.
So really, we are looking to the ad hoc committees to do the deep dive, and
Okay.
Especially with the executive search committee after the first meeting to really bring the structure back to the full board and explain to us kind of what the process entails.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I have been tasked with bringing up the urgency from my staff on the executive director search. Since October 18th, just to put it out there are currently 9 director positions in New York State that have been posted, 2 in neighboring states, 2 assistant director positions within the state that have been posted, several other director positions in other states outside of our region, and NYLA just posted their director position this morning. So if we don't want to lose talent with all of the director positions open, we might want to get moving very quickly on the director search.
Good to know. Thank you, Melanie.
We're getting on it.
Yep, thank you. People are getting a little itchy. They like me, but They're wanting the full director.
Yeah, he just left.
Does anybody else have any announcements or upcoming anything to bring to our attention before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Okay, if not, another productive meeting, and I will accept a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
And I
Second.
Thank you. Brigitte makes the motion and Brenda seconds. Any discussion on this motion?
That was Jalray.
Already seconded.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just wanted to make that noted.
I was watching the square that highlighted.
I'm a Cub Scout.
You are. Congratulations.
And motion carries. 3 not present. Who? Sarah had to jump off. Who else did we lose?
I might have actually. I'll fix Jalray's. I might have.
Okay.
I might have hit the override button. I apologize.
Okay. And with that, I think we are all set. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Go ahead, say I have my Bob Scout badge.
Oh, congratulations. Congratulations. Very nice.
How
Say
cool
good
is
night.
that?
Good night.
Good night.